At 9:45 p.m., my brother grabbed my garage key while everyone was asleep. By sunrise, the restored Mustang was crushed against a streetlight. Dad yelled, "Stop accusing him. You were born jealous." I stayed calm. Because it wasn't my Mustang he crashed. When Dad realized, the phone rang at 2:40 a.m. I was asleep in my house in Boise with the covers pulled to my chin and the window cracked because September nights in Idaho cool down to the low 50s. The caller ID showed Ada County Sheriff's Office. "Miss Rayburn, this is Deputy Oshoa with Ada County. We have a single vehicle collision at the intersection of Emerald Street and Linden Avenue involving a 1967 Ford Mustang registered to your business address. The vehicle left the roadway at approximately 2:14 a.m. and struck a pole. The driver has been transported to St. Alphonsus with minor injuries. He identified himself as Webb Rayburn and stated the vehicle belonged to his sister." I sat up. I did not speak for 4 seconds because the 4 seconds were the calculation, which car was in my garage, and the car in my garage was not mine, and the car that was not mine was now wrapped around a pole at Emerald and Linden, and the driver was my brother. "Is the vehicle drivable?" "No, ma'am. The front end is compressed to the firewall. The frame is bent. The vehicle is being towed to county impound." Was the driver intoxicated? A field sobriety test was administered. BAC was .11. He has been charged with Dewey and property damage. I got dressed. I drove to the intersection, 12 minutes from my house to Emerald and Linden at 2:50 in the morning when the roads are empty and the only lights are the street lights, including the one at the corner that was now bent 45 degrees with a 1967 Shelby GT500 crumpled against its base. The car was destroyed, not damaged. Destroyed, the front clip was folded backward into the engine bay. The hood was buckled upward and peeled to the right. The driver's door was open from where the paramedics had extracted Webb. The windshield was shattered in a starburst pattern centered on the steering column. The custom paint, Wimbledon white with Guardsman blue Le Mans stripes, was scraped to bare metal across the entire passenger side where the car had slid along the curb before hitting the pole. The rear quarter panel was cracked. The trunk lid was sprung open from the frame distortion. Glass fragments covered the asphalt in a circle 20 feet wide. 7 months of work. Every bolt, every gasket, every hour under the lift with a torque wrench and a trouble light. Gone in a slide that started at the intersection and ended at the crash site and lasted approximately 1.8 seconds based on the skid marks. I took 14 photographs on my phone. Every angle. Close-ups of the frame damage, the paint destruction, the shattered glass, the bent steering column where the aftermarket wheel I had installed 3 weeks ago was now cracked at the hub. I photographed the streetlight. I photographed the skid marks. I photographed the distance from the intersection to the point of impact, 47 feet. The documentation was automatic. I document every stage of every restoration. This was the final stage of this one. Deputy Oshoa was still on scene. I asked one question. Was there a key in the ignition? Yes, a single key on a red carabiner. The red carabiner. My shop key ring. The ring that holds the keys to every vehicle in my garage. The ring that was hanging on a hook inside my front door at 9 p.m. when the family dinner ended. The ring that was not on the hook when I got home at 9:30 because I had assumed I moved it to the workbench. I had not moved it. Webb had taken it. I drove to my parents' house, 7:12 a.m., Sunday morning. I did not call ahead. I parked in the driveway and walked through the front door, which was unlocked because Doyle never locks the front door, because Doyle believes the neighborhood is safe, and the neighborhood is safe from strangers, but not from the people inside the house. Webb was in the living room on the couch with a bandage on his forehead and a butterfly closure over his left eyebrow. He had been released from the ER at 5 a.m. Prue had picked him up. He was wearing the same clothes from the family dinner, a gray Henley and jeans, now with a dark stain on the left knee that could have been blood or transmission fluid or both. Doyle was in the kitchen doorway with a coffee mug. Before you start, he feels terrible. He took my garage key. He drove a car out of my shop without my knowledge. He crashed it into a pole at 2 a.m. while legally drunk. His back was .11. He made a mistake. A mistake is a wrong turn. A .11 at 2 a.m. in a car he stole from my locked garage is a Dewey and felony property damage. Doyle set the coffee mug on the counter. He had been waiting for this moment since Prue brought Webb home at 5 a.m. Stop accusing him. You were born jealous. Your brother is going through a rough patch and you sit in your little garage playing with cars like a teenager who never grew up. You are 32 years old and you change oil for a living. Webb made a mistake. The car is insured. Get over it and stop acting like the world owes you something because you can hold a wrench. Prue was in the hallway with her arms folded. Your father is right, Sloan. Webb feels terrible. Can we please just move past this? I looked at Webb on the couch. I looked at Doyle in the doorway. I looked at Prue in the hall. 3 people in a house at 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning, forming a wall around the man who stole a key, drank, drove, and destroyed a car. I stayed calm. I stayed calm because the car was not mine. Here is what happened at 11:30 p.m. The family dinner ended at 9. Doyle and Webb watched a college football replay until about 10:45. Then the house went quiet. Prue went to bed. Doyle fell asleep on the couch. I had left at 9:30. My shop key ring, the red carabiner, was hanging on the peg by the front door where I always leave it when I visit. I started doing it 3 years ago after locking my keys in the car twice at the parents' house. The peg is easier than my purse. Webb knew the peg. He waited until Doyle was asleep. He lifted the carabiner off the peg, put it in his jacket pocket, and left through the back door. He walked 2 blocks to my house, used the shop key to open the bay door, and started the Shelby with the ignition key on the same ring. My security camera recorded the bay door opening at 11:43 p.m. The footage is saved. I did not see the alert because my phone was on silent from dinner and charging on my nightstand. Webb drove to a bar called Trackers on Orchard Street, 4 miles east. He ordered bourbon, then another, then a third. He was there for approximately 3 hours. He left Trackers at approximately 1:45 a.m. He turned left onto Emerald Street. He accelerated. The posted limit is 35. The police estimate based on the skid marks and the deformation pattern was 43. He lost control at the curve before Linden Avenue. The car left the road on the right side, crossed the curb, and struck the pole. The airbag did not deploy because the car did not have airbags. It was built in 1967. The car that Glenn Cavill's father drove off a dealership lot in Nampa in 1971 ended its 53-year life against a pole on Emerald Street at 2:14 a.m. because a 29-year-old man who lives in a basement stole a key during a commercial break. I remember the day Cavill brought the car to my shop, a Saturday morning in February. He towed it on an open trailer behind a Ram 2500. The car was faded, dusty, and tired. The paint had oxidized to a chalky pink. The chrome bumpers were pitted. The driver's seat was cracked down the center seam. Cavill stood in my garage and put his hand on the fender and said, "My dad bought this car the year I was born. He taught me to drive in it. I promised him before he died that I would restore it. That was 9 years ago. I should have done it sooner. I told him it would take 6 to 8 months. He said, take whatever time it needs. Do it right." I wrote the contract that afternoon, $38,000 in labor plus parts at cost. He wrote the first check for $8,000 before he left and shook my hand at the bay door. A retired contractor handing a 1967 GT500 to a 30-year-old woman whose father told people she does something with old cars. Cavill did not care what Doyle called it. Cavill saw the Camaro SS in Bay 2, walked around it once, ran his finger along the fender line, and said, "This is professional work." That sentence is the reason my business exists. Welcome to Betrayal Unfolded, where the auto restoration specialist who builds cars for a living just watched her brother crash one into a pole while drunk, and her father called her jealous. If your family has ever destroyed your work and defended the person who did it, subscribe now. Because the car is insured, but the driver is not covered, and the car does not belong to the person they think. My name is Sloan Rayburn. I am 32 years old. I own and operate Rayburn Restoration, a classic car restoration shop in a converted 2-bay garage behind my house in Boise, Idaho. I do frame-off restorations, engine rebuilds, paint and body, electrical, interior, and period-correct detailing on American muscle cars and European classics from the 1960s and 1970s. I hold an A's Master Technician certification. I earn $72,000 a year from restoration contracts. I have been doing this for 9 years, since I was 23 and bought my first project car, a 1969 Camaro SS, with $3,400 I saved from working at a Jiffy Lube while my brother was living in the basement deciding what to do with his life. He is still deciding. My mentor Nairn has been in the trade for 22 years. He taught me to weld when I was 19 at his shop on Fairview Avenue. The first bead I laid was crooked and full of spatter. He ground it off with a flap disc and said, "Again." I did it again. The second bead was straight. He nodded once. The nod was the approval. Nairn does not use many words. The words he uses arrive with weight. Nairn is the person I called at 3:20 a.m. from the crash site, standing on the sidewalk with glass under my shoes. Webb took the Shelby. 4 seconds of silence. Nairn knew which car was in my garage. He knew whose car it was. He knew what the name meant. Cavill's car. Cavill's car, wrapped around a pole, front end to the firewall. Frame is bent. Paint is gone. Back point 1-1. Does Cavill know? Not yet. I need to file the insurance claim first and get the denial in writing before I call him. Smart. Document everything. Photograph the site, the car, and the tow records. When the denial comes, call Cavill, then call me. The 1967 Shelby GT500 belonged to Mr. Cavill, not to me, not to my family. To Glenn Cavill, 58 years old, retired general contractor, and for the past 14 years, my father Doyle's golf partner at Quail Hollow Club. Cavill brought the GT500 to my shop 7 months ago for a full frame-off restoration. The car had been in his family since 1971, when his father bought it used from a Ford dealership in Nampa. The odometer read 74,200 miles. The paint was faded. The engine needed a full rebuild. The interior was cracked and sun-bleached. The frame had surface rust along the rear subframe. Cavill's contract with me was $38,000 in labor plus parts at cost. He had paid $22,000 of the $38,000 in 3 installments over the 7 months. The remaining $16,000 was due on delivery. The car's appraised value after restoration was $185,000. Based on a Haggerty valuation for a numbers matching 1967 GT500 in Concours condition. The car had been in my garage for 209 days. A frame-off restoration means every component comes off the body, every bolt is cataloged, every piece is inspected, repaired, or replaced, and then everything goes back together in the correct order with the correct torque specifications. It is surgery on metal. I started by stripping the body to bare steel. Every piece of trim, every rubber seal, every piece of glass, every wire, every bracket, every clip. The parts filled 14 labeled bins on industrial shelving along the back wall of Bay 1. The body went to my media blaster in Nampa, came back clean and gray. and I spent 3 weeks repairing the rust on the rear subframe and the lower quarter panels using patch panels I fabricated from 18-gauge steel on my English wheel. The paint took 2 weeks. I primed the body with 3 coats of epoxy primer, block sanded it by hand to 320 grit, applied a sealer coat, and then laid the Wimbledon white base coat in 4 passes, using a glazurate system and a soda spray gun. The Guardsman blue Le Mans stripes were masked with fine line tape and sprayed on top. The clear coat went on last, 3 coats, wet sanded to 2000 grit, and machine polished to a mirror finish. The day I finished the paint, I stood in the bay with the overhead lights on and the doors closed and looked at the body sitting on the rotisserie under the fluorescence. The white was deep and warm, and the blue stripes ran straight from the hood scoop to the rear deck. I took a photograph and sent it to Cavill. He responded in 4 minutes, "That is the color my father drove off the lot." 4 minutes. 1 sentence. The sentence was worth 7 weeks of sanding and spraying and curing and polishing. I rebuilt the 428 Police Interceptor engine on a stand in Bay 2. New pistons, rings, bearings, cam, lifters, timing chain, water pump, oil pump. I had the heads ported and polished at a machine shop in Meridian. I installed a new wiring harness and re-chromed the bumpers through a plating service in Portland. I reupholstered the interior in black deluxe using correct reproduction materials. The restoration was 3 weeks from completion. The only remaining tasks were final trim assembly, a wheel installation, and the first start of the rebuilt engine. The first start is the moment. The moment the key turns and the engine catches and the car speaks for the first time in however many years it has been silent. I had been looking forward to that moment for 7 months. Webb took the moment along with the key. The original wheel was on my workbench, removed during disassembly and stored separately because it is the most sought-after component. The wheel survived because it was not in the car. Here is what my family does not know about what I fund. Doyle improves rent supplement, $650 per month. Doyle's pension and Social Security total $2,400. Rent is $650. The $650 gap is mine. 4 years, $31,200. Prue's car insurance on my policy, $240 per month. 3 years, $8,604 because Prue's individual rate after 2 fender benders was $460. Parents' internet, cable, streaming, $130 per month. 3 years, $4,680. Webb has no car, no license, no job, and no income. He did gig delivery for 6 months before the Dewey. He had an apartment in Garden City until 8 months ago when he stopped paying rent and moved back into my parents' basement. Doyle Co. signed that lease. The landlord is still pursuing the $3,400 in unpaid rent from both of them. Webb is 29 years old, and the only thing he has produced in the last 3 years is a Dewey, a total car, and a family that defends him for it. Total invisible support, $44,520. From the woman who plays with cars. The favoritism in this family is built on a single assumption: Webb needs help, and Sloan does not. When Webb dropped out of Boise State after 3 semesters, Doyle took him to lunch and said, "You will find your path." When I dropped out of community college to apprentice with Nairn, Doyle said, "You are throwing your life away on a hobby. Lunch for dropping out. Condemnation for starting a career." When Webb moved into the basement at 24, Prue made the bed and bought new towels. When I asked to use the detached garage behind my parents' house as a shop space before I could afford my own, Doyle said, "I am not running a junkyard. I rented a bay at a commercial garage for $800 a month until I saved enough for my own property." Doyle referred Cavill to me 2 years ago. This detail matters. Doyle did not refer him because he believed in my work. He referred him because Cavill asked at the club if anyone knew a good restoration shop, and Doyle said, "My daughter does something with old cars." The referral was accidental. Cavill called me, visited the shop, saw the 1969 Camaro SS I was finishing, and signed a contract the same week. He then sent 3 other clients my way. Those 3 represented $47,000 in booked work. The accidental referral built a pipeline. The pipeline was the business. Monday morning, 9 a.m. I filed the insurance claim with my commercial garage policy. The claim included 14 photographs, the police report number, the tow receipt, and the deputy's incident summary, including Webb's back and Dewey charge. Wednesday, the insurance adjuster called. The policy contained a standard exclusion, unauthorized operators. The policy covered damage caused by the named insured and authorized employees. Webb Rayburn was not named on the policy. Webb Rayburn was not an employee. Webb Rayburn was not authorized to operate any vehicle stored at Rayburn Restoration. The claim was denied. The denial letter arrived by email at 1:42 p.m. I printed it. I sat at my workbench next to the client's wheel and read it twice. Then I called Cavill. "Glenn, this is Sloan. I need to tell you something about your car." I told him everything. The key, the time, the crash, the back, the damage, the insurance denial. I told him the front clip was folded to the firewall, the frame was bent beyond repair, the paint was destroyed, and the car was at county impound classified as a total loss. I told him the restoration was 3 weeks from completion. I told him the original steering wheel was on my workbench because I had removed it during disassembly and stored it separately. Cavill was quiet for 12 seconds. 12 seconds of a man processing the loss of a car his father bought in 1971. The car my father drove off the lot in Nampa. Yes, your brother. Yes, drunk, .11. And the insurance. Denied, unauthorized operator. Webb is not on my policy. Then who pays for my car? Webb, and anyone financially connected to Webb. Cavill was quiet again. When he spoke, his voice was lower and slower, the voice of a man who is not angry yet but is approaching anger the way weather approaches, visible on the horizon before it arrives. "Sloan, that car is the last thing my father touched that I can still touch. The steering wheel, the shifter, the pedals. He wore the leather on the driver's seat into the shape of his back. I gave you that car because your father said you were the best. I trusted him. I trusted you. The car was locked in my garage. My brother took the key from my house during a family dinner. I did not give him permission. I did not know he was in the shop until the sheriff called me at 2:40 a.m. I know this is not your fault, Sloan, I know that, but I need the value of that car recovered. My attorney will handle it. I understand. I almost called Cavill back after we hung up. I almost told him I would cover the cost myself, absorb the $185,000, take a loan against my house, finance the loss personally to save the client relationship and the referral chain and the business Cavill's trust had built. But the contract stopped me. The contract on my clipboard, signed by both parties, with clear terms, clear liability language, and a clear insurance clause. The contract protected me. The loss was Webb's. Absorbing Webb's loss would be the same thing I had been doing for the family for 4 years, paying for damage I did not cause. The contract said no. I listened to the contract. I will call my attorney today. If you were following this on Betrayal Unfolded, subscribe. I drove to my parents' house Wednesday evening, 6:30 p.m. I did not sit down. I stood in the kitchen with the insurance denial letter in one hand and my phone in the other. Doyle was at the table with leftover pasta. Prue was at the counter. Webb was on the couch in the living room, visible through the doorway. Leg elevated on a cushion. The insurance denied the claim. Doyle looked up. What do you mean denied? Unauthorized operator. Webb is not named on my commercial policy. He was not authorized to drive any vehicle in my shop. The insurer will not pay. Then file it under your personal policy. My personal policy does not cover commercial vehicles stored at a business address. The Mustang is a client vehicle, not my personal car. Client vehicle? I set the denial letter on the table. The car Webb crashed is not mine. It belongs to Glenn Cavill. The name landed in the kitchen. Doyle's fork stopped between the plate and his mouth. He set it down. Cavill. Glenn Cavill. Your golf partner. The man you referred to my garage 2 years ago. The man whose 1967 Shelby GT500 was in my shop for a frame-off restoration under a $38,000 contract. The car is appraised at $185,000. The car is now at county impound with the frame bent and the front end compressed to the firewall. And your son did it at 2 a.m. with a blood alcohol of 0.11. Doyle's face changed. The color left his cheeks in a slow drain. His hands went flat on the table, the palms pressing the surface the way a man's hands press a table, when the table is the only stable thing in the room. You said the car was yours. I never said the car was mine. You assumed it was mine. You assumed it because you do not know what I do. You called it playing with cars. You said I change oil for a living. You told me I was born jealous. You assumed the car was a personal project because you have never walked into my garage and looked at the contract hanging on the clipboard by the door. The contract with Glenn Cavill's name on it, your golf buddy's name, on my wall, for 7 months. Prue's hand went to her mouth. Cavill retained an attorney this afternoon. The demand will come to Webb first. Webb has no income, no assets, and no insurance. But the attorney is also naming you, Dad. You recommended my garage to Cavill. You told him I was professional. Webb is a member of your household. He accessed the vehicle from a shop you referred the client to. The attorney's theory is negligent recommendation and household liability. Your assets are exposed. Doyle stood up. The standing was not authority. It was the body's response to the math. I did not know it was Cavill's car. You did not ask. You walked into this kitchen at 7 a.m., called me jealous, told me I play with cars, and defended the man who stole a client vehicle from my shop and crashed it drunk into a pole. You had 4 hours between the crash and my arrival to ask one question: whose car was it? You did not ask because you assumed the answer. You assumed it was my hobby. You assumed the damage was mine to absorb. You assumed wrong. The damage is $185,000. The liability is Webb's, and because you co-signed his lease, the liability reaches you. Webb appeared in the kitchen doorway, limping, bandage still on his forehead. I didn't know it was worth that much. You did not know because you did not ask. You took my key from inside my front door while I was in the bathroom at the end of dinner. You drove to my garage, opened the bay door, started a car you had no permission to touch, and drove it to a bar, and from the bar to a streetlight. The value is not the point. The permission is the point. You stole from my shop. I was going to bring it back. You brought it back into a pole at 43 miles per hour. The front clip is inside the engine bay. The frame is an S-curve. The car cannot be repaired. It can only be valued. And the value is owed to Glenn Cavill. I looked at Doyle. The car is Cavill's. Your golf buddy, $185,000. And the insurance does not cover Webb. 17 words. Delivered in a kitchen where the pasta was getting cold and the fork was on the plate, and the man who called his daughter jealous was doing arithmetic he had never been asked to do before. Cavill called Doyle on Thursday. I was not on the call, but Nairn heard about it from a mutual contact. The call lasted 4 minutes. You told me your daughter's garage was professional, Doyle. You said she was the best in Boise. I trusted you. I gave her my father's car. Your son stole it from her shop and wrapped it around a pole at 2 a.m. with a .11. I have retained an attorney. You will hear from him. Doyle said, Glenn, I had nothing to do with this. Cavill said, you co-signed his lease. You raised him. You defended him. You had everything to do with this. The call ended. Doyle did not go to the club the following Saturday. Or the Saturday after that. 3 members of his regular foursome heard about the incident. 2 canceled standing games. The 3rd sent a text, "Sorry about the situation. Doyle, let things settle." The settling was permanent. 2 of my 3 pending restoration clients canceled their contracts within 10 days. A 1971 Plymouth Barracuda owner named Fitch called and said, "I heard about the Cavill car. I cannot risk leaving my vehicle at a shop where family members have access." A 1968 Pontiac Gito owner named Dell sent an email, "Given the circumstances, I will be taking my car to another restorer." $47,000 in contracted work, gone because Webb took a key and Doyle raised the man who took it. The demand letter from Cavill's attorney arrived on September 15, addressed to Webb Rayburn. Copy to Doyle Rayburn. The letter stated, total loss of a 1967 Shelby GT500, appraised value $185,000 plus $22,000 in restoration payments already made, plus towing and impound fees of $1,240. Total demand, $208,240. Webb's assets, 0. Webb's income, 0. Webb's insurance, none. The attorney's filing named both Webb and Doyle. Webb as the driver. Doyle under a theory of negligent recommendation. Doyle had referred Cavill to Sloane's garage. Doyle's household member had access to the property, and Doyle had failed to prevent a known liability from intersecting with the client's property. Doyle's home, valued at $310,000 with $180,000 remaining on the mortgage, had $130,000 in equity. The equity was now at risk. I stopped the rent supplement that week, $650 per month. Done, I removed Prue's car from my insurance, $240 per month. Done, I canceled the internet payment, $130 per month. Done, total monthly support eliminated, $1,020. I almost left the insurance active. Prue needs her car for the part-time library job, but the hallway stopped me. The hallway where Prue stood with folded arms and said, "Can we just move past this? Past this." The phrase a family uses when the consequence should land on the person who caused it, and the family wants it to land on nobody. The insurance is past this now. Nairn came to my shop the Saturday after the demand letter arrived. He brought coffee and a box of nitrile gloves. He walked through the empty bay, looked at the workbench, and said, "The bay is empty. Fill it." That is what Nairn does. He does not narrate the loss. He clears the space. Webb's Dewey case was assigned to Ada County District Court on September 22. First appearance, October 3. The charge carried a mandatory minimum of $1,000 in fines, 180-day license suspension, and up to 6 months in county jail for a first offense. Webb's public defender advised him to plead guilty with mitigating circumstances. The mitigating circumstances were that he was going through a rough patch. The judge would decide whether a rough patch is a legal defense. It is not. Without a license, Webb could not do gig delivery. Without gig delivery, Webb had no income. Without income, Webb could not hire a private attorney. The demand letter sat on the kitchen counter next to the coffee maker, where Doyle saw it every morning. Doyle called his bank the week after the demand letter arrived. He sat at the kitchen table with the letter in front of him and his reading glasses on and called the number on his mortgage statement. He asked about a home equity loan to settle with Cavill before the case went to litigation. The bank ran his financials. Doyle's home was valued at $310,000, with $180,000 remaining on the mortgage, leaving $130,000 in equity. The bank said they could approve a line of credit for up to $95,000, but the monthly payment on a $95,000 draw would be $780 for 15 years. Doyle's pension and Social Security totaled $2,400. Without Sloan's $650 rent supplement, rent alone consumed $650. Add $780 in equity payments, and Doyle's monthly obligations exceeded his income by $30. Negative $30. The margin did not exist. Doyle did not take the loan. He called Webb into the kitchen on a Wednesday evening and told him the numbers. Webb asked what he was supposed to do. Doyle said, "I do not know." The "I do not know" from a father who had always known, who had always had a daughter paying the gap, who had always had a solution that wore a wrench and asked for nothing in return. Prue's car insurance returned to $460 per month the following week. The $220 monthly increase was the cost of 2 fender benders my umbrella had been absorbing. Prue's part-time library salary was $1,100 per month. After the insurance increase, gas and groceries, she netted $340. That was what remained of a life funded for 4 years by the daughter she told to move past it. The internet disconnected on October 1. Doyle drove to the library where Prue works and used the public computer to check his email. The email from Cavill's attorney was in his inbox, a follow-up to the demand letter requesting a response within 14 business days. Doyle stared at the screen in the library lobby for 3 minutes. Prue was working the circulation desk 15 feet away. She did not look over. Webb came to my house on a Tuesday evening, 2 weeks after the demand. He knocked. I opened the door but did not invite him in. I want to apologize. For taking the key, for drinking, for driving, or for the car, for all of it. The apology does not reduce the demand letter or give me back the 2 clients who canceled. The demand is $208,000. An apology and a demand letter are not equivalent. What do you want me to do? I want you to answer the demand letter. I want you to appear at your Dewey hearing. I want you to stop living in a basement and start paying for the consequences of the choices you made at 9:58 p.m. when you backed a car you did not own out of a garage you did not build. Webb looked at the ground. He left without speaking. I closed the door. The following afternoon, Nairn drove past Emerald and Linden on his way to a parts supplier and saw Webb standing at the curb where the car had come to rest. The pole was still bent 45 degrees with orange cones around the base. The city had not repaired it yet. Glass fragments were still visible in the gutter, small pieces that caught the afternoon light. The skid marks ran 47 feet from the curve to the impact point, 2 dark parallel lines on gray asphalt that told the story in the simplest possible language. Here is where the tires locked, and here is where the car stopped. Webb was standing at the end of the marks with his hands in his jacket pockets. He was not on the phone. He was not with anyone. Nairn said Webb stood there for at least 10 minutes without moving. Standing where the car stopped was the closest thing Webb had to a response. Nothing he could do would undo the crash or repay the demand. He could only stand at the end of the skid marks and look at what one night produced. Prue came to my shop on a Saturday morning in early October. She had never visited my shop before. In 4 years of my running this business, my mother had never once walked into the garage, looked at a car on the lift, or asked me about a project. She arrived at 10 a.m. and stood in the bay doorway, the same position she takes in every doorway, arms at her sides, weight on one foot, the posture of a woman who is present without committing to presence. Your father cannot sleep. My father cannot pay the demand letter. Those are different problems. He did not know it was a client's car. He did not ask. He assumed. He called my work something less. He called me jealous. He defended the man who stole from my business. None of that required knowing whose car it was. All of it required choosing Webb over me. He made the choice before the question of ownership was relevant. He is your father. He is the co-signer on the apartment lease of the man who owes Glenn Cavill $208,000. Fatherhood does not change the cosign. The attorney does not care who raised whom. Prue looked at the empty bay. The lift was bare. The fluorescent lights hummed above the concrete floor where the GT500 had sat for 7 months. She looked at the workbench where the original wheel sat on its foam pad. She looked at the tool board, the air compressor, the paint booth in the back corner. She was seeing my business for the first time. The business she had never visited. The business her husband dismissed and her son destroyed, and her daughter built from a 2-bay garage and an ACE certification and 9 years of work. She did not say anything else. She walked back to her car and drove away. This is the last dollar, the last insurance premium, the last internet payment, and the last time I fund a family that watched my work get destroyed and called it jealousy. My garage is my business. My key is mine. The next person who takes it answers to the attorney, not to me. I said it to Doyle on the phone the following Monday. He did not respond. Saturday, October 4. 4 weeks after the crash. A flatbed truck backed into my driveway at 9 am carrying a 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle SS in cranberry red. The owner, a retired firefighter named Tolliver from Meridian, had called the previous week after seeing my work on a restoration forum. New client, new contract. $34,000 in labor. The car came off the flatbed and rolled into Bay 1 on its original wheels, and the rolling was the sound of a car entering a shop, and the sound was the beginning. I raised the Chevelle on the lift. I walked underneath it with a trouble light and began the inspection the way every frame-off restoration begins, looking at what is there and making a list of what needs to happen. Rust on the floor pans, solid frame rails, original drivetrain, matching numbers. The engine was a 396 big block with the original intake and carburetor still in place. The car had been sitting in a barn in Meridian for 11 years. It smelled like old hay dust and dried gasoline and the specific quiet stillness of a machine that has been waiting for someone to decide it is worth the work. I decided. The car had potential. On the workbench, the client's wheel sat on its foam pad. 3-spoke, wood grain, chrome center cap with the GT500 emblem. The wheel was the only surviving component of a restoration that was 3 weeks from completion when a brother took a key and a father called the builder jealous. The wheel is the part the driver holds. The driver who destroyed the car never held this wheel. The wheel held nothing. The wheel survived. The Chevelle was on the lift, the steering wheel was on the bench, the bay was filling again. The shop was working again, and the woman who plays with cars was underneath a 1970 Chevelle with a trouble light and a clipboard, listing what needs to happen next, because what needs to happen next is the only direction that matters, and the wrench in her hand is not a hobby. It is the tool that built the business that a brother tried to crash and a father tried to dismiss, and neither of them could stop. Welcome back to Betrayal Unfolded. If this story reminded you that the person who builds the car knows whose name is on the contract and that a garage key stolen at 9:45 p.m. can produce a demand letter for $208,000 by the 15th of the month, and that the woman who changes oil for a living is the woman whose oil you cannot afford to lose, share it tonight. Hit subscribe, drop a comment, and tell me, has your family ever destroyed your work and then told you that you were the problem? I will see you in the next one.